Dave, earlier today, CFL Twitter put this out to the fans. What is the greatest moment in Canadian football history? And for me, I say hands down 2013 Grey Cup Riders.
Wow. I myself would have probably lent to the kick in 89. And I think I'm much younger than you listening to what you and the Double C's were talking about last hour. But 89 was a defining moment, I think, for our province, because I remember my teachers in school were booking it off so that they could fly out to the brand new Skydome in Toronto to get out to that Grey Cup game, because it had been forever since Saskatchewan got in there. So the 2013 game, I'm not taking anything away from it, but 89, I would think a lot of people would probably start to gravitate toward that, especially in Rider Nation.
89, I think, and this is a great question. Prairieland Rentals text line 306-936-6262. Your greatest moment in CFL history. It doesn't have to be for Riders. 89 was great. Yes, and it snapped the streak and the drought. But to me, 13 was more special. And we've heard a lot of the players talk about it. Because of the heartbreak in 09. And then we lost in 2010. 11 and 12, not memorable. And then in 2013, just with all the pressure and the expectation, and then they came through when they needed it most, and they won. Obviously, if it's not 2013, if we didn't win in 2013, I would say 89. But because of what led up to that, it was almost like the Star Wars saga. The story was told, and you could put a bow on it. And I know in 2014, things were going well until Darian gets hurt, and they could have repeated. But since the story had to end there, I'm going to say it's because of the lead up to 2013. That those 5 years before is what did it for me.
I can't dispute you, but when I look at 89, there were two generations right there that hadn't seen anything like that before. Mm-hmm. And when you're in minus 40 at the Grey Cup parade on the steps of the legislature, and again, just it wasn't expected. It was a team that peaked at the right moment. And I've read a lot of stories and or books about the 89 team, whether it's from Saskatchewan and or beyond. And some observers say, well, you look at Edmonton just picked a bad time to have a really bad day. Well, you know what? The other team on the other side had to have a pretty good day for you to have a pretty bad day. So to me, just because it was so unexpected, it was the team that peaked at the right moment. It was Tom Burgess, it was Kent Austin operating together as a duo quarterback or a tandem that actually worked. That didn't work in BC last year. Sorry. Didn't need to rub salt into those wounds. But I'm just saying, because there were so many things that it seemed the odds were against the team, that's why I'd have to put it ahead of 2013.
You said something that you had teachers from Weyburn flying to the Skydome. What kind of money would the teachers in Weyburn getting paid? That their airfare back then was not cheap. And they're just balling on a teacher's salary?
No, like in full disclosure, right? So the Flame, you remember the Flame, right? Sandy Monteith was from Weyburn, right? So Sandy, he organized a bunch of trips like that, whether it be to Calgary or where. And again, he was sitting in the stands with that thing blowing off the top of his helmet, which is a different discussion for a different day, because if you ask him about the number of concussions he had, it was like, wow. And again, that was the time you lived in where you could actually take that type of material into a stadium. But again, I digress. But Sandy Monteith, right? He was the guy in Weyburn when it came to Roughriders. He was the guy that you wanted to be associated with. And when this opportunity came up, right there, this game was far from sold out before the Roughriders got in there. And people were dumping tickets left and right. So the tickets were very minimal. And at that time, the airline somehow had the flexibility to add more flights that week. So again, it was only 1 week in between the two, right? And both airlines at the time added extra flights. So it wasn't as cumbersome to get there as it was before. So I remember, again, that's my memory of it, is the teachers and a lot of people that I knew were heading from Weyburn to the Grey Cup in 89 for this new stadium, this new experience. Like, again, the schools were unruly because, like I said, my teacher was gone. It was complete chaos a little bit trying to get substitutes. But again, that's my memory of 89, just because it was so unexpected and it hadn't happened in so long. That's why I put it up there.
So my memory of the game while it was happening, I was a busboy at the restaurant called the Station Place in Saskatoon. So the restaurant with the 2 train cars in it.
Mm-hmm.
So the night of the game, there's nobody in there. Obviously, the Riders hadn't been in the Grey Cup in years. There's no customers. So they let us watch it in the lounge. So that's where I saw the winning kick on remember what a big screen TV used to be like an old school, like 1980s big screen TV. We were watching it on that. And it was just the staff. I think there may have been the odd customer, but for most part, it was a ghost town. And then everybody went mental when the kick happened. And I remember it. That was, yeah. But yeah, it's so funny, the different eras of Rider football, because people remember it differently, because the era that we're in now, the post-Durant era, like what are the young generation of fans clinging to? Like what are they going to remember about this era? Be great if we could win a Grey Cup this season. There would be a whole new set of memories and a whole new fan base that this will all update, and the 2013 will sort of fade. But until that time, that is still the thing. So, yeah.
Well, and I hate to say this, what does a younger fan right now with the Saskatchewan Roughriders think? They're probably not thinking G. Roy Simon catching a pass and waltzing into the end zone from Darian Durant. They're thinking of Cody Fajardo clanging a football off the goalpost in the West Final.
Yeah.
That allowed Winnipeg to go on a run that has really been unstopped since.
Speaking of swearing at the TV, oh man, jeez. Just, it's funny how, like, look at in the Tom Brady Tuck Rule game and look how that all turned out. And I equate that clank to, like you had said, look what Winnipeg went on to do because of that.
Yeah.
Man, oh man. So when they say, it's amazing what one moment in time can do to change the trajectory of something. All right. I'd mentioned this earlier in the show that the Riders yesterday or today, Leon Jones from Arkansas State. He went to Chicago Bears rookie camp last year. He's a cornerback / defensive back stats. All we hope and pray with any of these signings of these random people we've never heard of before is that somebody hopefully will turn into the next Roland Milligan Jr., because here was a guy that they show up out of nowhere. Some scout sees something somewhere thinking, and then it all pans out and it pays off. We're just hoping that one of these guys will pop to be the next one. This is what you do in the CFL. You find gems that are unearthed and you shine them up, and then hopefully future stars come.
Absolutely. And what I think is interesting, so years ago, the Saskatoon Blades used to have an award that they handed out at the end of the year called the Diamond in the Rough Award. And that's what you're essentially looking for, right? And like these players that they brought in, they may not be household names right now, but you're definitely hoping to get to that level. But what I think is fascinating is that in the technological world that we live in, Pro Football Focus, right? So PFF, if you've been following along with the players of the week in the Canadian Football League, they're strategically chosen using PFF rankings. So these this player football focus, right? So if you look, they actually go ahead and they rank the players in terms of what they do in drills at training camp. So you can see this young man had an outstanding camp from the Chicago Bears and was definitely the reason why he was one of the last cuts last year. So obviously he's got some moxie, he's got some ability, and now he's got an opportunity to try to prove it up in Canada. The only thing that is so tough that I feel for, and I really didn't get a sense of it until Luke Mullender and I had a conversation last year, just how tough it is for an American to crack a Canadian Football League roster, because you come in with a lot of talent and a lot of skill, but a lot of times you don't have the experience, right? And literally you're going to have 10 days of training camp to make your mark, to prove that you can be a starter in the Canadian Football League, right? Because they'll keep some special teams guys around. But if you don't have that experience, it is so hard to gain that in that critical amount of time, because basically you've got week 1 of the preseason where you're going to evaluate your talent, generally, depending if you're home or away, because it seems now that CFL teams are trending towards playing some of their starters at home to go ahead and gratify their home fans, which they should, right? Because they're the ones that are paying to be there. So play some of your starters, of course. So that first game is literally evaluation. And then the second game, you've got to be looking at evaluating, but also we got to implement this game plan and see whether or not we can execute it. Because if we can't, we got a problem entering week one, which is just another week away. So it is so hard to go ahead and crack that roster. And like I said, Luke sat me down and he said, like, Dave, you got to realize, right? Guys that have been in the league, it's a small league, so they have an understanding of what needs to be done. Where these guys that are coming in, they're learning a new game. They are experiencing a new country predominantly, and they may have all the talent and ability, but it's so hard to assess that and or get a true feel of that in such a small amount of time. So the work that these athletes do, again, they'll be starting to get their playbook soon, and they'll be starting to look over them so they know exactly what's coming up at training camp, albeit still a month and a half away.
I feel for any of the guys that are playing corner or halfback, especially if they're new to the league, because if you're on the line's the line. That doesn't change. You're a linebacker, you're probably there. What kills you is the width of the field. When you're brand new, all of a sudden there's how many extra yards on each side that you've never had to account for anymore. The sideline is your friend. Now, going up against a veteran receiving corps like the Riders are going to have, advantage automatically to the receivers because they know where to go. These new guys like Leon Jones isn't going to have his bearings. He's not going to know because his old buddy is 8 yards further out than it ever used to be. And the other thing too is that can easily be exploited. And that I feel those guys, especially defenders coming in, and like I said, corners and halves, they have the worst. They have the best chance to look the worst just because of the field size and that lack of inexperience that Luke talked about.
Well, and the other big factor, right? And I believe it was Omar Morgan that said this. And again, I apologize if I'm wrong, but he said, okay, I'm getting ready to play in the Canadian Football League. I'm going to line up as a halfback. And the coach says, you've got this interior receiver right here. That's him. So you see him break the huddle. Everything is good. Everything's great. You're trying to get your bearings because there's an extra player on the field. Like you mentioned, the field has got a lot bigger width and dimension. And then, well, what? He gets a running start.
Running start?
That doesn't happen.
I know.
He's been running for 10 yards. He hits me at full speed, and I got to go from 0 to 100 in less than a half a second and keep my positioning and understand where I have to be and what my assignment is on that play. And I'm like, yeah, that one makes sense.
Yeah. And when we had Darian on a couple of weeks ago, because I remember when the world was different in the CFL and teams were, if you had the money, you could go to IMG in Florida and have those camps. And Darian said, even if you could just even in the home cities, get them together into the domed, workout facilities to get them together, some OTAs, because it's funny. It's that small stuff there. And it looks like because that one side is going to be new, that's exploitable early, especially to those early games in the season. If you've got guys that are just going to be trying to learn the league, because let's see, who's on that other side? You got Milligan on the other side, and who else is going to be there? Is Campbell playing that side?
Probably Campbell, I would assume. And then you put Marcus Sales on the far side like he was last year.
Yeah, so you're going to have at least one new guy in there playing corner half. Safety, I mean, between Lacombo and Dalkey and whoever, that's, and the other thing is that's still new. It's not like that's a 5 to 7. It's not like you have Suits back there that's in year 9 of being a safety and it's just on lockdown. That is still, to me, I think, a work in. Would you agree? Is that still a work in progress?
Yeah, but Nelson Lacombo at the end of the season are in the trust of his coaches. They were very clear on the growth that he exhibited basically Labor Day on, right? It just clicked, and his athleticism allowed him to be in the right spot. He finally was able to go ahead and get that interception, that game against BC. If you recall, there was a couple of games before that where balls actually hit him in the hands and he dropped them, right? Which he never did in university. So I would suggest the comfort level came along with Nelson Lacombo and the strides that he made. And of course, their willingness to re-sign him and secure him, I think speaks volumes. And the one guy that I think is interesting that we're not talking a lot about is Jackson Ford. Because Jackson had a great rookie season. Then last year he was plagued down by injuries and, again, just couldn't get onto the roster, right? Because he missed so much time. And so I'm very intrigued to see what he is going to be able to bring, because he was highly thought of coming from the Regina Rams, of course. And let's face it, his lineage in football, of course, is very strong as well. So I'm very curious to see what Jackson Ford can do coming into camp healthy, getting a run at it day one, and we'll see where he ends up.
I think a lot of us, like Katsantonis in Hamilton is a hitter. Atunde at Delake, I've always liked where he was as a smaller safety. He was a hitter. I think for a lot of us, if Lacombo is the guy and there's that comfort level there, that going over the middle is hopefully a very dangerous place for receivers because of the Saskatchewan Roughrider defense. Because look how that changes the game when you have a safety that you know will deliver punishment. Alligator arms come out pretty quick sometimes when a guy knows, I'm not taking that punishment, I'm not taking that hit.
Well, and it's interesting when you mention Katsantonis because he, of course, was out in UBC, and him and Nelson Lacombo, their timeline in Canada West football was very similar. So the two of them would be on the field at the same time on opposite sides, if you understand what I mean, with, of course, Nelson being with Saskatchewan and Katsantonis being with UBC. And the one thing that scouts at that time that were observing the two of them together playing against each other, the one thing that they talked about was the athleticism of Lacombo. Now, Lacombo wasn't playing safety. He was playing halfback because the Huskies started him at corner. They moved him to half so that he could be more involved in their defense. And a lot of the scouts talked about his athleticism and the way that he was able to get places that they hadn't seen other players getting to, and his ability to read the football game in front of him. So that was what scouts liked, and they would place him above Katsantonis, who had a much more physical presence in that secondary because he played safety all along. But again, the reason the scouts liked Lacombo over Katsantonis at that time was they just purely felt that his ability physically to get to where he needed to be and his athleticism much more suited the Canadian Football League game. And of course, with the way that football is changing and not allowing those big hits, hearing footsteps is almost as effective as delivering one of those big blows.
Yeah. Riders started their American mini camps last week. They were in LA last weekend, were they not? Did I read that right?
Yeah.
Was it LA? Yeah. LA.
Yeah, they've got a series of 6, I believe, ending in Atlanta.
Yeah, a week before training camp. Mm-hmm. Be interesting to see what gems get unearthed there. The one part I was reading through the schedule, and Curtis, I don't know if we have it to pull it up. The beauty of this, I'm like, that's why I love the CFL. One of them, I think it's the second last one, is at a high school somewhere in the States. Like not some field or something like that it's actually at a high school, which is probably a really nice facility, or maybe it's not. But the fact that it's at a high school, that's, for as much as I hate the CFL at times, there's certain things, kitschy things like that, to be like, of course it's at a high school. And you probably all had to hop the fence because nobody had the key to unlock the gate. So everybody had to hop the fence to get on the field.
The American high school football fields that I have seen lately,
I know,
have been good. Incredible. It's not like the old Weyburn Junior High School field where everybody grabs a pail of sand and fills in the gopher holes before practice.
Nice. Now that's earning your keep. These kids nowadays, they've got it too good. Like these kids, what? There's going to be no flood before our game? And back then there was no climate change crisis. There was all the water in the world. And they were conserving back then to be like, what do you mean you're not flooding between games? We're in a tournament here. What? What's happening? Let's see. What else is going on in the world of sports? Streak stat. Pats lose last night in a shootout in Prince Albert.
Hey, impressive game. Game. The Pats hadn't been able to beat PA all year long, and last night they were down and they scored 3 goals in the third period to just force extra time. So I give Brad Hariff and the staff credit because they know they've got a young team, and the most difficult challenge that I would suggest that the Regina Pats have right now are keeping the kids engaged, because right now they know they're not going to make the postseason. So they already have to start planning. Okay, I'm going to have to transfer my high school from here to back home. I have to make sure that I get all that taken care of. But then I'm 16, 17 years old. I get a chance to go back and see some of my friends who I haven't seen since September. And so trying to keep the team dialed in, I think, has been done effectively by the Regina Pats because, again, it's a young crew and they know that I don't want to say outmatched because that really goes ahead and casts shades on the Pats. But again, they are a young team that's developing and learning how to play together and understand what it takes to play night to night in the Western Hockey League. So for me, I give the coaching staff a ton of credit for keeping these young guys dialed in. And the leaders on the roster have done their job, right? They're showing the way. And that just goes to build culture and foundation, which I think that the Regina Pats will have brighter days ahead because of.
Home and home this weekend with the Warriors. Friday at Moose Jaw. Saturday, 6 o'clock face-off. The Brand Center, 5:30 pregame show right here on 620 CKRM with a 6 o'clock face-off. 4 games last night, 5 games tonight. Swift Current at Saskatoon. And it's funny, if there's one team that has been the Saskatoon Blades, no matter how good or bad they've been, kryptonite over the past 10 years, is the Swift Current Broncos. And you can't explain it. The Broncos play the Blades tough, and I don't expect anything different tonight. Just when you think that you have them solved, you don't, because Swift Current shows up and the Blades are in a pretzel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, oh, absolutely. And don't forget, the Swift Current Arena gives that team such a huge, like, if you've never been to Swift Current, go. You're going to love the rink because it's old school. It's a little narrower, I would suggest, than the standard WHL size rink, although that is debatable. But just the way they've got the benches on opposite sides of the ice, right? It's not like the new style construction where the benches are on the same side and the penalty boxes are on the other. They got the benches on the opposite sides of the rink, and then the penalty box is over beside the Swift Current Broncos bench. So if they're penalized, their guy just steps out onto the bench all night, and then the opponent has got to go all the way across the ice. I think it's just hilarious. It's such a great facility. You'd love it.
Brandon's in Edmonton, Kelowna, because of the Briar on a road trip. They're in Lethbridge to take on the Hurricanes. Are we buying Lethbridge stock? Like I said, they've stocked the roster for sure. Does the chemistry come together?
The one thing that I really find hard is that Willie Desjardins knows how to assemble a hockey team and a championship hockey team. And Medicine Hat, again, they've kind of been cruising and bubbling along here all season long. But again, I never count out Willie Desjardins. Just the guy knows what he's doing when it comes to hockey. And I'm not suggesting others don't. I'm suggesting that team, when it comes time to play in the playoffs, they've got some horses that are ready to run.
Okay. Kamloops at Portland, Prince George at Wenatchee. Eastern Conference standings: Medicine Hat 88 points, Calgary 84, Lethbridge 80, Prince Albert 74. So Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, Calgary, and PA have clinched playoff spots. The other 4 up for grabs. Out in the West, Everett 91 points, Spokane 84 points, Victoria 81. PG, Everett, Spoke, and Tri-City, along with Victoria, have clinched. So only a couple more spots up for grabs there. Regina Pack Canadians tonight have a chance to, in Prince Albert, taking on the Mintos, go up 2-0 in their AAA playoff series. And we had mentioned this last hour. These first round series, especially for a team like the Pack Canadians that ended up in first place, try and get this over as fast as you possibly can. Because if you let the Mintos hang around, there's a good chance that they come through with the upset. You have to take care of business, whether it's on the road or at home.
Completely agreed. And I'm really excited to see what Prince Albert's going to try to do. They gave Regina a run for their money, right? A 3-2 victory by the Pat Canadians in game number 1 was extremely tight. And the Mintos, obviously, they know they've got to limit Maddox Schultz and what he's going to do on the ice for the Pat Canadians. But I'm very interested to see how they continue to try to defend him.
But it's funny, but can you? And you know this, you see this. As soon as he draws 2 guys in, he dishes the puck off, and then there you go. And then there's the odd man situation, and then that's it. I mean, it's not to be saying that it can't be done, but he's made it look incredibly easy for a kid that should only be going to AAA next year. Could you imagine what next year is going to be like? With
absolutely.
Blazers in Tisdale to take on the Trojan. Oh, no. Go ahead.
I was going to jump in and tell you, I've got the curling game on the screen just right behind you. So they blanked 7, so they're going to go to 8 now. So how cool is this? 2 Saskatchewan teams still tied at 2. Yeah.
I know.
Must win for Kleider, because Kleider, they don't do tiebreakers anymore. And I don't know if I like that or not, but the one tiebreaker is head-to-head. So right now, Kleider is tied with Quebec for that 3rd and final playoff spot in Pool B. So they play them in their final draw tomorrow. So the winner of that may make the playoffs. But the next thing is, after head-to-head matchups, is that last shot draw to the button. And for Team Ryland Kleider, they've actually almost got double the distance that other teams have, so they're not going to win that one. So this game is highly important to them. So we'll wait and see whether they can pull it off against Mike McEwen, who is rolling with his sweepers using those Rider receiver gloves.
Yeah, it's like we started. This is kind of like Super Wednesday. This is really weird. It's never happened before where a Saskatchewan team has taken on a Saskatchewan team at the Brier. It'll probably happen lots going forward, but up until this point, and here again, yeah, Kleider needs to win for a chance at the playoffs. And you and I have chatted about this with 18 teams. 6 seems cruel. More the better. And even when we had Jacob Carr on earlier, even my kids were saying, "Dad, why are the seats not all filled there? Like, why are people not watching? Wouldn't you think that it would be sold out? That, and who knows why?" Now they're not going to come out and say, "Oh, we've got huge attendance problems at the Brier this week. There's just a lack of interest." You're never going to hear that. But the TV does not lie when the seats are empty.
Well, the evening draws have been attended well. It's the draws that are the morning and the afternoon ones that are traditionally tough, but a lot of those seats are sold, right? Because full event packages are purchased. So then they go ahead and they give them to students and whatever. But yeah, I agree with you. The one thing that I find intriguing is that, so okay, we all know the Rick Folk drought at the Brier for Saskatchewan. There was some conversation that if Mike McEwen were to win the Brier, because he didn't win the province, does that mean he actually has ended Saskatchewan's drought? Because he's a wild card entry, right? So if Mike McEwen wins, does it or doesn't it? And I know that there was some thought that no, it doesn't count. But to me, 3 of the 4 guys are from Saskatchewan, right? Like, they followed all of the rules to be eligible to play in the Saskatchewan provincials if they hadn't already pre-qualified. So I think it counts. If McEwen wins this thing, the drought is over.
So explain this to me, because my wife and I got into an argument about this. And I'm like, so McEwen isn't from Saskatchewan, but he's done enough to satisfy that he is a curler from Saskatchewan, correct? In curling Canada's eyes, is that how this works?
No, so you're allowed an import on every team, right? So Mike McEwen is the import on that team, right? So that's why they curl out of Saskatoon's Newtown Curling Club.
Okay.
But because they aren't a true provincial representative team, they're a wild card team. That's where the conjecture comes into as to whether or not, if they win, they actually end the drought or not, because they didn't go through the Saskatchewan provincials.
I knew that I had some sort of argument, but no facts. And you know what it's like. You're married. I'm like, is this worth the next 3 hours of my life? No, so I'll just, but I'm like, I'm going to ask Dave, because I know, like I said, I knew that there was imports and that the rules had really changed, because before, unless you're from there and you're curling there, like, you couldn't play for anybody else. Where now, like, I didn't realize Rachel Holman lives, what did we find out? In St. Albert. She doesn't actually live in Ontario, we think.
No, she runs curling schools that my son attends in the summer, along with Kevin Martin. Like, no, Rachel Holman for years has lived in Edmonton. Like, that's where her husband lives. Like, they've lived there for years and years. But she was the import on that Team Ontario that qualified through Ontario. But then, being from Team Canada, the same rules don't apply, right?
Yeah. I would just say that's a pretty good import. That's, normally you hope the import just holds its weight and doesn't tie up a spot or become like a personnel problem. I would say she's probably the exact opposite of what a lot of imports and a lot of things are. Since it is tax season, I will ask you, have you done your taxes yet?
I'm thinking about printing off my T4 soon. So no.
Okay. Well, I told this story earlier last year. We don't have an accountant. I've done taxes on our own or whatever, but last year's a little more complicated. So I went and I found a place in a strip mall next to a Domino's Pizza. And I've told this story before. I love Domino's Pizza. So we were in there and I was getting my wife's and mine done. And the lady, a really nice lady, she was asking, she's like, "Oh, there's one form. Do you happen to have that? Or could you like go on your phone and maybe like if you could pull it up in email or you could go and download it?" So what I had asked her, because every business now has Wi-Fi, right? That's not crazy of me to ask, right?
No.
And she goes, "Oh, we don't have Wi-Fi, but you can use the Domino's Pizza Wi-Fi next door." and I had said, "Well, nothing against Domino's Pizza's Wi-Fi, but this is a secure document with like personal information on it. And not that Wi-Fi is the best place to be downloading that to your phone, but I figured you're a tax office. You probably have maybe secure Wi-Fi for this tax document. And she's like, no. And then she said, the owner doesn't believe in it. And I'm like, okay, good. So the owner
probably owns Domino's Pizza, and he's probably using the Wi-Fi there as a business expense and a write-off on his taxes.
So I made a deal with her, and so by this time, a few other people had kind of crowded around the cubicle because I was like, as I started laughing, which she told me, and so I'm like, how about I'll email it to you when I get home. I'll scan it. I'll find the document. I'll scan it to you, and I'll just send it to your personal email. You have email, right? Oh yeah, we have email. She's like, who do you think we are that we wouldn't have? I said, well, I don't know. You don't have Wi-Fi. You're telling me to use the pizza place's Wi-Fi next door. So last Friday, iPhone and answer. Oh yeah, I had to come out. Oh yeah, you can come in tonight. And I'm talking like, oh, have you been before? Yeah. I was there last year or whatever. Oh, are you the pizza Wi-Fi guy? And I'm like, yes. And I asked the guy on the phone. His name is Dean. Listens to the show. And I said, so is there a status update? He's like, no, still Domino's Pizza Wi-Fi. Owner still doesn't believe in it for the business. I'm like,
wow.
All I can say is all was good. Never got audited. Never got anything from the CRA that wasn't not. And it's funny. When I left on Friday, I peeked my head into the Domino's Pizza next door. Got remodeled. They have a whole new storefront, so I peeked my head in and went from there. So I'm just wondering. And do you know how they charge these days, Dave, for taxes? And I like this. Well, no, I don't. But if I was running a tax office, they charge you per document. So you get your base of doing your taxes. T4 is a charge. A T5 is another add-on. A T4A, like the more documents you have, though, that's how they're upcharging you now. It's like a la carte, where it's not just taxes. It's $75 or $99. It's per document. And I'm like, I told the guy, I said, that's a good scam. Like really, because if you come in there and receipts, like if you're doing expenses, it's a whole Pandora's box you're opening there of tax.
Yeah, the old Seinfeld episode, doing the taxes, losing the folder. Look out. Coming with a shoebox. Here you go.
So go support local businesses. This is a time of crisis. Government needs all its money it can as fast as it possibly can. We need to rally the troops. That's as political as I'm getting today, Dave. So print off your T4. Do your part for Canada, the government, and the sovereignty of this country. All right? And we can wrap up.
I'm on it.
Hey, Domino's, no free shout-outs, but I would take a 14-inch thin crust double pepperoni ham mushroom
with two T4s on the side.
Yeah, with anything else. All right.